Right. Good morning, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. There was a bit of latency there because I'm running behind. We're 2 minutes late, but we are here and we are ready to rock and roll. That's just how much work I had going on in the background. I was preparing all sorts of graphics for you all, and we're going to get started. So, happy Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in over on News 6 Plus and over on the News 6 YouTube channel. Let's share this information because we have a lot of big up and comings to discuss today. You don't want to miss it. As always, I'm News 6 meteorologist David Nazario talking wintry weather and snow for Florida, not Central Florida. I'll go ahead and rip that Band-Aid off. Central Florida will not be seeing any snowfall, but if you do happen to have some spare time next week, the probabilities of there being a flurry or two and some freezing rain or ice up there in the panhandle in northern Florida do look to be rising slowly but surely. So, since we are a little behind the curve, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into it. Let's get on over to the next big thing. So, as you can see, these are our weather headlines for Central Florida. So, through the weekend, rainy weekend ahead. Sunday mainly going to be the main event for all that jazz. Tomorrow, we could see some light intermittent showers coming up from the south thanks to a bit of warm frontal activity. I'll show you on the satellite imagery here in a moment. And then, as you can see, early week, lots more rain and, drumroll, some snow and ice in the forecast. Again, not for us here in Central Florida, to tell you the truth. That would be near impossible to make happen. It'll be very chilly. It'll definitely feel like freezing weather, but the genuine bona fide freezing layer from where we are at ground level all the way up the atmosphere will be, in fact, extending into northern Florida. And through the weekend, we'll continue to dial in just how far to the south that freezing layer could come. And then, last but not least, there at the bottom, over the next 7 days, we're not done yet. Models are hinting at we could have even more upcoming doses of cold weather and rainfall on the horizon as we get closer and closer to the back end of January. Is it just me, or is time really going by? It is already January 17th of 2025. We are already approaching the month mark since Christmas, and it feels like I just came back from holiday travel and holiday shenanigans like a week ago, which is incredible. It goes to show this year is going to be picking up steam, and it is already doing so in a variety of ways. All right, we have to go right into the water vapor to break down what's happening. So front and center, I'm going to break out the handy dandy pen tool right there. If you tuned in yesterday, we discussed how we could see our winter storm on the map that's going to be bringing down our Arctic air. There it is, right in the center of the screen. We'll say center upper portion of the screen, right below our ticker tape, where it says Friday at 5:30 a.m. This is a little earlier, about 6 to 7 hours ago. You could see that low pressure center racing down through the Canadian border, down into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. And as a result of that, that dense Arctic air back behind it is just being magnetized, pulled on down towards the south. Here is our storm system down in the deep south, currently positioned over the desert southwest. That's also going to be moving in this general direction over the next 24 to 36 hours. This coupling and phasing, as it's called, of these two storm systems is what's going to help further bring down all that Arctic air, which is why it does appear like the conditions will be conducive for some wintry weather impacts as far south as our friends just to our immediate north of our Central Florida viewing area. So from Pensacola through to Tallahassee, through to possibly Jacksonville, you should be exploring the potential that you'll actually have to do battle with some freezing conditions and possible ice, if not some sleet. Not seeing too much in the way of very heavy snowfall, maybe a mixed event with some flurries peppered in with the ice and the freezing conditions we have at the surface, and I'll show you that here in a second. And then after that, we're watching all this jet energy that's still racing through the eastern Pacific over Mexico, Baja California. That's what's going to interact with our polar front jet, with our next upcoming trough that the models are pinpointing for us, and create that potential winter onslaught right in through there where I have my little cylinder or my oval, my elongated hamburger patty drawn over the southeast. Now, This is the latest from Climate Prediction Center. There's a couple things I want you to notice here, and I'll take us full screen so you can see. First and foremost, the greatest below average temperatures. I know that sounds like a bit of a conundrum. Greatest below. The most below average temperatures are going to be over the mid-Atlantic, extending into the southeast. And you can see even here for Central Florida, from Tampa, coast to coast, I'll say, we are now looking at those incredibly below average temperatures, especially for our friends in the Panhandle, our neighbors to the north and the west. That is where our frigid temperatures are going to be in place. And that's what's really going to prime us for what's coming. I'll show you some of the latest model data. And finally, after the debacle we found ourselves in yesterday, it seems like the models have decided to finally come together and show us a bit more agreement. Now, I'm glad that they did at least this far in advance. I was hoping by yesterday, if not the day before, we would start to see more of that run-to-run consistency, as it's called, minus some very subtle deviations and changes. But unfortunately, yesterday, as you all know, who actually joined us yesterday, we were talking about how there are still some dramatic adjustments being made. Today, that is not the case, thankfully. So we can comfortably air all this out and discuss a little bit more at ease, because I don't think, now that we're within the 4 to 5 day threshold, are we going to see anything significant change. Now, here's the upper level changes. Speaking of change, let's go ahead and take a look at what the jet stream is doing. So, as you can see, there goes that system coming down, and that big conglomerate, that big bulge of pink, violet, and purple colors. That is your big dose of Arctic air. And then once again, back over here, we got to watch what this little guy does. See that random, almost opposite Target looking thing. If it were red and white, that'd be the Target logo for my Target fans out there. It's like the opposite of that. That's another small little dose of cold air that is going to slowly but surely be pulled into the main branch of the jet stream right in through there, where you can see that change and that gradient between the yellow shades here and then the most cold shades up to the north side of that. This is an interesting feature as well. I'll go ahead and take us over there real quick. Let me turn the telestrator off. That here, folks, is called a Rex block. And when I say Rex block, it's because we have a sharp amplitude ridge button right up against the west coast of the United States into British Columbia. And when we have an area of low pressure like this stuck underneath it without any real steering flow or any real feature to interact with it and move it in this direction or move it in this direction, it gets hung up. It gets stuck underneath the ridge. That's why it's called a Rex block. It's like a giant speed bump in the pattern. It's going to slow these features back behind it down, and it's also going to slow this feature down as well, which is why those cold temperatures are going to be migrating and marinating over top of us for such an extended period of time. Go ahead and erase my ink here, and we'll continue through the loop. So watch that little bowling ball thing. See how it's stuck out there as we go through Saturday into Sunday, and then now we're in Monday. Notice how it still really hasn't moved. That's the blocking pattern out there. Now, finally, as the ridge itself, you can see where it was all the way up into British Columbia, almost getting into Alaska. Now it's come down. It's down into southern British Columbia, the Pacific Northwest, and California. Notice how now we're finally on the move. We're going to start to absorb that energy. Energy is finally coming in towards the desert Southwest just in time to interact with what's happening here. So, believe it or not, as weird as this may sound, as this feature topples and dies, and we pick up the energy from this leftover remnant bubble of cold air, it's going to feed into the main branch of the jet here. And now, as we get into Tuesday, when we're expecting this next winter system to develop down in the western Gulf of Mexico, see how now there's a slight little kink in our contours right there? Looking right through Oklahoma and Texas. That is a shortwave trough. That's what's going to help to ignite all the bad weather that's going to be coming for the southeast. And you can see right there, I'll go ahead and delete the ink and redraw it in. There's our little shortwave. And if you look closely, notice how the contours, the little lines here, they stay fairly uniform. But then all of a sudden, as soon as you get to this one, bam, there's a little bit of a drop. And then bam, another little drop. That's your short wave. The difference between short and long wave, kind of like your radio waves and your electromagnetic spectrum. I know that's very heavy jargon, but, hear me out. Very similar. Long wave are the big features, the ones that extend over a whole continent. Short wave like this is going to be into just an isolated region of whatever it is you're looking at. And in this case, it's right up against the Gulf Coast of the United States. So that's going to be a very interesting feature we continue to watch over the next several days. Here's our track in the freeze once more. And if you watch, as that Arctic air comes down, look at that. It has now finally made it all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico coastline by Sunday, early Monday morning. And you can see those freezing conditions into the Big Bend of Florida through Jacksonville and St. Augustine, trying to get down to maybe the Palm Bay area, just barely outside of Daytona Beach. Daytona Beach, you're probably going to be near freezing, but again, we're not going to be fully frozen through the column. That's what you need for the snow and the ice and the mixed wintry impacts. And in this case, we're just going to be really cold, but we'll still have a profile in the vertical of the atmosphere to where we're not going to realize snow, sleet, or anything like that into Central Florida. It's all going to be potentially, and again, this can change, confined to northern Florida. There goes our system. And if you look as that system rocks through, those temperatures try to dip a little bit further to the south into northern Florida. Now, let's take a look at the winds. And the reason we're going to actually look at the winds today, and I've removed my caution banner, is because we're finally getting more and more confident and locked in without significant changes run to run. And in this case, I'm going to air it out and show you all what we could be expecting. And I'll go full screen. There's our first boundary right there coming on in. And you can see both the pre- and post-frontal winds are fairly busy. Before the front comes through, we could be very gusty out of the southwest, coming in out of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, moving from Tampa up towards Brevard, Volusia County. Then from there, you can see all that cold air sloshes in like a mud flow, and the winds are going to stay elevated between 15 to 25 miles an hour, gusting anywhere between there. And that's what's going to influence our wind chill and why it's going to feel extra cold outside while this is ongoing. And then here comes that next storm system. And once again, the model has kind of reined itself in, albeit we're still looking at possibly gusty conditions. Tampa at 40 miles an hour, Orlando at 34, Miami down as far south as Miami, up to 32-mile-an-hour gusts intermittently. Now, again, remember, these are gusts, so they're not going to be sustained. These are not going to be consistent conditions. Even if you see one or two gusts of this nature, you could possibly see a little bit of damage out there because these are technically either borderline or at that tropical storm threshold because of how vigorous of a storm system we may have coming through. All right, so I got a little ahead of myself. It is 11:44. If you're over on YouTube, please stick with us for my new 6 Plus, folks. We're going to go ahead and take our 2-minute break, and I'll be right back. I'm also going to take a look at some of the most recent model data, and if things look promising and consistent, I'll pull it up on here for your viewing pleasure. So stand by, folks. I'll be right back. We're back. Okay, so before we start to look a little more long range again and tie this stream into a lovely bundle, I want to step us through what this weekend will look like, particularly because it is going to start to get busy here in Central and North Florida for the entirety of the state of Florida. For us, within the next 12 to 24 hours, things are going to start to change. Today, intermittent clouds and sunshine, and then tomorrow, much of the same with that steady increase in cloud coverage with the approach of the front and the warm front itself lifting in from the south north across the state, which is also going to increase our rain chances ever so slightly. But then Sunday will be the main event. And with that, I'll go ahead and, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Let's go full screen with our in-house Barron model. This is our high-res 3-kilometer model, so we can pinpoint exactly what's happening across the state of Florida. And what I'll do, too, here is to help you all out, I'll go ahead and throw on some places so we can see exactly what we're talking about here. There we go. It's looking a little more full and vigorous. So this is what we have tomorrow morning. You can see Saturday we have some of that onshore flow in association with our warm front occurring over the Panhandle and the Big Bend of Florida. And across the rest of us here, you can see that warm advection coming out of the south, that movement of the warm air to the north, which is also going to help to fuel the rain threat for tomorrow and especially Sunday. Now, as we go through time, notice Saturday, scattered showers. Mainly going to be isolated for the northern portions of the peninsula, but then now near Deltona, Ocala, just to the upper periphery of the greater Orlando area, attraction area, we could see some very stray and light showers. Nothing heavy tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a garden variety type of day. This is 5 p.m. in the afternoon, whatever you may be getting into. Most of us in the greater Central Florida area will be clear. You can see on the north side of the state, however, we're starting to feel the impacts of that front. The sun sets, and we begin to set the stage for the main event. And if you look up in this portion of the screen, you can see where that cold air is coming down. There it is. It's starting to make its way into the Pensacola, Eglin Air Force Base general area as this continues on. And then finally, as we wake up and start the day on Sunday, we have a really good line of showers and storms possibly moving through the state of Florida. Now, Storm Prediction Center doesn't have anything with this. Storm Prediction Center has us highlighted for a chance for thunderstorms. However, I would err on the side of caution that we might have maybe some moderate level thunderstorms embedded within this line just because of how vigorous that frontal push, that cold air push is going to be. Nothing severe, I don't think. I haven't really looked at too much in terms of severe weather with this. I'll openly admit that. But I can see some gusty winds with this inside this line of thunderstorms and showers that move through. Not necessarily just with the winds around our front and winds around that low pressure system. They could be associated with the rainfall in the storm complexes themselves. This is around noon. You can see it finally getting into Central Florida. And then, Lord willing, I have big plans with the family that day. By about 3, 4 o'clock, we'll finally start to really clear out with maybe some residual showers left over behind the front as that cold air very slowly sinks in like oil from your automotive or from your vehicle by about the 7, 8 o'clock time frame. And that's when things are really going to cool down dramatically. So that's a bit of a timetable for tomorrow and Sunday. Let's take you on over to the temperature anomaly. So here is where we sit right now, kinda. We're still seeing the introduction of that Arctic air, and you only go about maybe 12 hours into the loop, and there it is. You can finally see it emerging out of Canada, and it takes the country by storm. We're looking potentially at the coldest inauguration in the last 40-some-odd years up there in Virginia, Washington, D.C. And then down in Florida, you can see we are kind of sticking out like the sore thumb that we are, still in the light to darker shades of blue, not necessarily in those extremely below average temperatures like our neighbors will be to the north. And then further up from there, we're looking at negative temperatures, easily negative temperatures. Then we start to refresh the pattern. You can see a bit of that warmth coming back in as we finally evacuate from that Arctic air. And then as mentioned in our weather headlines, if you watch closely in the northwest, here we go again. Starting to see another batch of Arctic air coming back down as we get closer to the tail end of January and prep for February, my birthday month. I'm really excited about that. Got some big plans there as well. Now, before we get ready to wrap up, I don't see anybody in the chat today. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in. We do have a decent amount of people watching. If you have questions about your area or just questions in general, feel free to give them a holler. This is the possible ice brought to us by the European model. So obviously through the weekend, you can see the timestamp at the top there, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, not much. But then if you watch as we go through Monday and into Tuesday, that's when we start to see the potential for some ice buildup to our northern viewing areas. Obviously, again, not here in Central Florida. We're not going to have the temperature profile, as it's called. And when I say profile, I'm looking at where we are at ground level all the way to the top of the troposphere, where the weather actually occurs. So from ground level, where we are, all the way up, that's the profile, three-dimensionally or looking at it vertically as opposed to flat on a chart like this. There are conditions conducive for ice, sleet, and freezing rain for the north. And then I'll also show you here the snowfall brought to us by the GFS. You can see, look at that. Pensacola, Eglin Air Force Base trying to squeak its way into the greater Tallahassee area. Maybe some flurries mixed in with the potential mixed wintry precip that we have going on up there. A lot will hinge on where this storm system decides to manifest itself. A lot of the times, the models have been a little more lower latitude or to the south of where they originate and where they go. We saw that with our last winter storm that produced conditions for Texas all the way up through to the Carolinas and Tennessee. It formed up further north and ended up lifting further towards the north. So that will pay dividends in what happens, especially for the state of Florida. And we'll have to watch that as we go through Sunday night into Monday morning. And then last, but certainly not least, the probabilities. I'll just go right to the end so you all can see. There you have it. So the Euro does think we could have equal to, if not greater than, an inch between Texas all the way into parts of Alabama. And then Florida, we cannot discount us either. Even though we are in the lighter shades there, we could still see some snow up there in the panhandle. I can't rule that out. It seems weird because it's Florida, but it's not unheard of. Florida does get snow. It just takes a very precise pattern to do it. And in this case, it kind of looks like we're getting there. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and start to close out. Don't see any questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and say thank you all so much for taking some time out of your Friday, I was going to say Monday, Friday morning to join us here in the Digital Weather Center for your winter weather and possible snow brief to round out the week. Now, that's one heck of a way to round out a week. Obviously, as you know, we will not be present Saturday or Sunday. I'll be doing the morning show, however, so if you want to tune in over on the broadcast side of things, I will continue to discuss this in the time frames that I'm allotted during our morning shows, both Saturday and Sunday. And then check us out on social media, Instagram, TikTok. I think we have an X. If not, Facebook, where we will continue to post routine round-the-clock updates pertaining to all this weather scenario, this weather situation that we're expecting to unfold over the next 72 to 96 hours. But until next time, folks, I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Try to stay dry. Try to have fun and enjoy, especially tomorrow before the rain kicks in on Sunday. Going to be watching that closely to see how much of that coverage continues on. Does seem like it's going to come through in a linear fashion since it is a front, but regardless, we shall see. And until next time, we'll see you again soon. This is the Digital Weather Center, signing out.